was saved. And science also tells us that indeed mangroves regulate tidal waves. In this particular publication, published in Science magazine, the Asian tsunami, a protective role for vegetation. If you look at the left side of your screen, those that are red were exposed, that means damaged during the tsunami. But those, look at the green one, no, at the back of the green ones, they were saved because of the dense mangrove. In this particular publication, science also tells us that there is a significant wave force reduction if we have wider, denser, mangrove green belt. No, significant wave height as well. As the wave goes inside the mangrove vegetation, the height of that wave also reduces, as it traverses. Another one is on the mitigation side. The mangroves, of course, is a powerhouse of carbon sequestration. And generally, mangroves with salt marsh, seagrass meadows, they are collectively called blue carbon ecosystem. Why blue carbon? It reflects the color of the ocean. And it's not that difficult to understand how this works. Through the process of photosynthesis, mangrove sequester or takes in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in the biomass. But much of the biomass is not really on the tree, or much of the carbon is not really on the tree, but embedded in the sediments or dun sa mud or peat. That's why for saying that it's a powerhouse of carbon sequestration, mangrove holds 3 to 4 times higher carbon stock or larger carbon stock than other terrestrial forests. You name it. Imagine an old-growth dipterocarp forest with the nest of Philippine eagle. If you compute the potential carbon stock of that site, it's no match for a simple natural mangroves along the coast, because most of the carbon stock are stored or embedded in the sediment. In this particular photo in Palawan, you see it's an old-growth forest with this much of carbon stock. So 653. Usually upland forests, even plantation of mahogany range about 300 to 400. But look at the mangroves, 600 and better or larger. In Antique, 1,190 megagram carbon. Megagram is ton, or 1,000 kilogram. Okay, so yeah, very big. This is how it looks like based on several studies in Southeast Asia. As much as 939 tons carbon or megagram carbon. Hence, it's right to say that if we allow mangrove deforestation, we are also allowing voluminous carbon emission, like this one. Why serious conservation is immediate? Let me provide you some reason. Number one, arrest deforestation and degrading ecosystem services. And we have roughly about, how many now? 15.7 million hectares of mangroves left. Philippines about 300,000. And Asia, 41% share of the total global mangroves. And the Philippines rank 15. Asia has the most mangroves, and ironically has also the serious deforestation, particularly in Southeast Asia, where 50% of the world mangroves are found. We are talking about 20,000 hectares annually of mangroves being, cleared or, deforested. And true enough, for Southeast Asia, a decadal change was actually 2.1% between year 2000 and 2012. So we lost about 2.1%. And what are the main drivers of deforestation? Human-driven, or anthropogenic factors, particularly agriculture or aquaculture. In the case of the Philippines, we have, fish pond, and for other countries like Malaysia, oil palm, oil palm plantation, conversion of mangrove to oil palm. This is how it looks like, in terms of the Philippine mangrove covered through time. Yeah. We lost already about 400 or 40%. And then, but the trend is now improving. You look at the most recent years, year to 2015 to 2020. Why do we need to be serious on mangrove conservation? Because of the people are dependent on many mangrove resources and services. Roughly 50% of community-based forest management projects are situated in mangrove forest. Okay. Reason number two, mangroves help enhance local resilience. In this study, we did, an observation, a case analysis of a small coastal community in Alitas, Infanta. Before it was like this, no, rampant fish pond. And why we have selected this place? Year 2004, there was a major catastrophe, disaster that nearly killed 1,600 people. No, there was a strong typhoon causing landslide and floods, and not particularly on this community of Palitas because they are actually protecting a good uh, mangrove cover. So before, fish ponds that became abandoned, now those abandoned fish ponds, the local community stepped in to rehabilitate this site. And we looked at the how they describe the function of mangroves as far as improving their resilience against climate change and against other disaster. Number one, community resilience is commensurate to the area of mangrove forests covered that they are protecting. So these are insights from the community themselves. Like for example, they have that roof thatching and shellfish gleaning livelihoods from mangrove. They also said that protecting mangroves provide them shield against typhoon and strong winds and even floods. Joining the reforestation project extra means extra income for some, and they have this traditional knowledge of putting up a bahay kubo or a nipa hut inside the mangroves, so that during the strong typhoon, that the particular hut will serve as their temporary shelter inside the mangrove. They said that you are protected from strong wind and also the storm surge. And big part of that study is to come up with this framework on how really coastal resilience can be achieved. That is through collaborative management of mangrove stakeholders involving the local government, the local community, the private sector, the NGOs, the SUCs, all that can be brought in to be able to, to come up with a cohesive, and collaborative project, that will empower local governments, that will also empower people or local organization or community, how to say, people's organization. Then, hence, pursuing human well-being and ecosystem well-functioning. Number three, of course, mangrove conservation will will help solve climate change. And let me just provide you some information. It's first time in the Earth history that we have reached the 414 concentration, the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which means the more how to say that, concentrated, the more carbon dioxide we have. That means more warming of the Earth. So never in the Earth's history that we have reached this high. No, it usually goes up and goes down. And we are actually here now at the present. We are roughly about 1.09 degrees Celsius, no, from the pre-industrial global mean temperature. Scientists tells us that we should keep it below 1.5. And the tipping point is 2 degrees Celsius. If our temperature, global mean temperature, will increase by an additional 2 degrees Celsius, then there will be a scary future. Like many, climatic system will change. We'll be receiving perhaps more typhoons, stronger typhoons, serious drought, you name it. Those are the surprises of a changing climate. That's why this is the tipping point that we don't want to cross. And also, the latest IPCC report tells us that on the average, yearly, we are emitting about 38 to 40.5 gigaton carbon dioxide. Giga means billion, so billion tons. And for every 1,000 gigatons of carbon dioxide, no, or carbon emission, it is likely to cause a 0.45 degrees Celsius increase in the global mean temperature. And this is how it looks like. Business as usual, worst case scenario, we will cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius. But again, that's a moral question if we allow that to happen. That's why I commend such effort from AFS, from IFSA, to have this kind of discussion or webinar to always remind, particularly the youth, of the need to be serious about this global environmental problem. And also the opportunity to share about mangroves, because much of the battle when it comes to carbon sequestration, or to say that uh, reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is through mangrove conservation. What else? Impacts of this would be tropical cyclones could last longer after landfall in a warming world. This is what we have observed from the recent category 4 and category 5 typhoons that we had, Typhoon Haiyan and Typhoon Odette. Very wide swath, wide in area, and they are very slow. So they have ravaged a lot of our communities. That's what we have now, this kind of tropical cyclones. In terms of sea level rise, we're seeing this kind of scenario: 630 million people living on land below projected annual flood levels. Metro Manila is likely to be under water, particularly these coastal areas, not only because of sea level rise, but there is a serious problem already of ground subsidence because of too much pumping of fresh water from the ground. The ground also receded or subside. If you have subsiding land, and if you have increasing sea level, that's a very scary mix. We don't have to wait to year 2100 to be able to experience significant sea level rise. By 2060, scientists are projecting, no, that's red already. You look at the West Philippine Sea area is already covered with red, particularly Metro Manila. So can mangroves cope up with sea level rise? The answer is yes, because the reason for asking this, when we do conservation and planting, we have to know if our mangrove, those mangroves that we're going to plant, will survive the sea level rise. Yes, if the mangrove forest floor will also rise up equal to sea level rise. And how can they rise up? Because we protect them. They have rich vegetation, they produce much litter, and they can also effectively trap sediment. That's why accretion, they will also, the ground or the sediment will also accrete or increase. And also, if there's enough space to move landward, because when there's sea level rise, naturally mangroves will go backwards or towards the higher elevation. But they cannot go directly, way above on a dry ground. So yun yung problema. They have a specific preference of, areas that is usually have tides. We call it intertidal area. Can mangroves cope up? No. The answer is no, because on this particular, to say that reason, there are already built environments that denies them a landward migration. Like this mangrove, if there will be a sea level rise and you have built environment like that one on behind a power company somewhere in Batangas City, then they cannot move, because they cannot grow over concrete lands, no, or concrete pavements. Change in hydrology will also a critical one. They cannot cope up with sea level rise if there will be a change of hydrology. That means access to salt water and tidal regime. They need that the usual, access to exchanges of salt and fresh water. And naturally, they're also blocked by these barriers, no? So imagine sea level rise, they cannot climb on